Good morning, I'm William J. Redden, the chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee people. Before we progress, I must read the legal documents here, so please bear with me. The Scrutiny Committee is being conducted on a hybrid basis in accordance with the Local Government and Election Wales Act of 2021. We'll operate alongside the Council's standing orders to ensure that we continue to take democratic decisions in an open and transparent manner. I will remind members that this meeting is being live streamed to the public. Can I request that you switch off your cameras and mute your microphones and mute your microphones when you're not speaking to ensure there is no unnecessary background noise and to help with the audio and visual quality of the broadcast. The Council standing orders and code of conduct will apply to all times during this virtual meeting in the same way as ordinary meetings, and members should conduct themselves accordingly. Can also remind members to ensure that the chat function is switched on and that they use this facility to indicate when they would wish to speak on a particular item. Please do not speak until you're invited to do so, and remember to unmute your microphone and switch on your cameras. As well as being broadcast live, a recorded version of this meeting will be uploaded on the Council's website for the public viewing as soon as possible after the meeting. Well, translations of this proceedings can be provided upon request. The images of the same recordings may also be used for training purposes within the Council. Wow, we've got to try and shorten that down somehow. Thank you. We go to item 1, apologies for absence.
Already had apologies from Mary Ryan, Chair.
Okay. Declarations of interest. If any come up during the meeting, you can always declare them. Okay, minutes of the previous meeting, 3 to 8. Do we have, have I moved them? Do we have a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. All in favour? Thank you. We jump straight in now to the Director of Social Services annual report, and it's a pleasure to welcome you here, Sally Ann Jenkins, this morning, and the team. We're going to start on page 15. Here. And the director, I guess, will take us through what parts, and then we can come back and
so just by way of an overview, the Director of Social Services has a statutory function to provide an annual report. The annual report goes to our government and it goes to Care Inspector at Wales, and it needs to go through the democratic process of the Council. So we do today, Cabinet 14th of June, and then into Council in this is my report. So whilst I can take recommendations from you, and I don't need to change things, which is an interesting position and a different position from the position that we're normally in, where of course we are as officers absolutely beholden to our political colleagues, but this is a slightly different function because of the statutory role of Director of Social Services. Some of you will remember that this report actually came through and went through the democratic process probably only 7-8 months ago, and you're thinking, why has it come back so quickly? Councillor Marshall asked me, why are you back so fast? You know, this is, but actually what has happened was that over COVID and with the change in directors, the report had got later and later in the year. So by the time it came into yourselves and went through the process and indeed went to Welsh Government and CIW, it was January, February. And when we looked at it this year and we had a discussion with colleagues on Scrutiny, we felt that that was inappropriate. This is a report about last year. If you don't talk about it until January, everybody's forgotten and they're looking at that this year, aren't they? So this is very much about 22, 23 and a backwards look. We touch a little on going forward and priorities for this report is supposed to cover the previous year, but hence why you've got 2 reports in quick succession, basically. And we will now keep to this timetable. So next year it will be here. Much of the format and the content was laid out for us. So the kind of various sections we have to report on human resources, we have to report on finance and so on. We have to report hotel. So a lot of that's laid out for us. For the past 2, possibly even 3 years, there's been, Welsh Government have been looking at the format of this report and looking at the purpose of it. Because one of the things, and I would agree with this, is the challenge about who is this report for? Is it for the inspectorate? Is it for officers? Is it for political members? Is it for the public? And at the moment, I think it somehow tries to sit between all of those things, and hence probably fails all of them. So I think there is something about looking at going forward in the future. And Welsh Government is currently out to consultation to look at the format of this report for all local authorities. And again, if you look at the 22 Welsh local authorities, all of them do this differently. All of these reports are public documents, you can look at all of them. And I have looked at all from last year and the year before. They're all really, really different. They go from 8 pages to 100 pages and everything in between. So there needs to be some more consistency in terms of how we're preparing this report. The decision that I made this year was to very much look at the stories and the words of our staff largely, and to look at how they see their roles and the things that they wanted to tell us and they wanted to share. And I also tried to look at largely areas of service that we haven't looked at very much in terms of particularly, for example, scrutiny. So you'll notice there's not a great deal in here about children's residential care, because we've talked about a lot of children's residential care elsewhere. So I've tried to focus on picking up things that perhaps we haven't talked about as much. I can't cover everything. Social services is huge. Adult and children's services and prevention is massive. So I think we need to accept this report as a headline story of social services. What I would emphasise to you is that the pride that staff take in the work that they do, and some of that is very clear in the way that they describe their work, and also some of the compliments that we get. I mean, very often social services, it's hard. We're delivering services for people who are very vulnerable, who are very often distressed, who are frail, or are in need of protection. And so it can be quite difficult sometimes to really please all people, given the needs and given what we're trying to do. But what you'll also see in this report is a number of compliments that have come from those receiving services. I mean, even in terms of the reablement service, even the dog was pleased with the service. I don't think you can ask much more than that, really. So, and I suppose the other thing I would take, and again, I've highlighted, is the staff. I mean, we always talk about the staff. We talk about our people are the most important asset that we have. I think in social services, that is 150% true. Without our people, without our staff, social services doesn't exist. The strength of social services is very often founded on the relationships that we build with people. It's about how we build relationships with those people, be that the people that receive our services or be that our partner agencies. And if we're unable to build those relationships, we fail. So our people are crucial. And you will be as aware as I am that the last 3 years have been immensely challenging for all staff, but across social services, incredibly difficult against the backdrop of the restrictions of COVID, but also the losses that they've experienced. And now going forward, of course, we are looking at the vulnerability in the population that we work with, that some days you almost feel like it's almost gone, it didn't exist, it didn't happen. Day in, day out, we see our children, young people, adults and older people who are living with the consequences of COVID, living with the losses, the loss of opportunity, the loss of health, the loss of friends and family, and the loss of opportunity. So some real challenges ongoing for our staff who are already pretty worn down. So I think that just gives you an overview really in terms of how we've got to the point where we are today. I would hope by next year we have a different format for this report and we have something which brings us more consistency across Wales. But for today, this is what you have in front of you as something of a story of social services over the past year. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for that. And good morning to the cabinet members as well. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Okay. We're going to start then, if there's any questions on page 17. And was there anything on page 17? Okay, I'm gonna ask a question on para 3 of 17. Are we getting to the are you receiving any form of financial uplift regarding newly arrived families?
So in terms of anything silence and children, we absolutely receive financial support from the Home Office. For every child that comes to us as an unaccompanied family seeker, we receive financial support from the Home Office. And there's various types of support that we receive, but yes, we are.
Excellent. Thank you for all of that comment. Okay, page 18. Page 19. Page 20.
Chair,
Okay.
states you have approximately 300 referrals a month. Can you explain the process for us councillors, how we refer
Okay, so for children,
age pensioners?
older people or children, it doesn't make really matter in a sense. So for older people, all our referrals come in through first contact. I mean, one of the challenges in social services is that our services are for people who require care and support. And one of the challenges that we often have is that, sadly, there is a limit on what we can offer. And what we are looking at all the time is what else can be offered. So the first port of call is in through that front door, through first contact for older people, through the safeguarding hub for children. But I suppose one of the challenges that we have is a very high number of the referrals that we receive, we will take no action on. We will look at perhaps indicating that there are services in the community, there are services for prevention and inclusion, community connectors, carers support, which would be more appropriate. It is only when older people, adults, children, young people, where they tip over that cusp of needing really what is quite significant support before we're in a position to offer that care and support. Okay. So that's my first thing. So, I mean, 300 referrals a week is what we get into children's, actually. That's the figure that we get there. Within adults, we get a similar sort of number. A very high proportion of those referrals we will not do anything with other than indicate them that there are other services, that there are perhaps other parts of the community that they need to be looking at. And the other issue that we have with older adults, particularly, is capacity. Is that very often what happens is that we get referrals from neighbours, from friends, from families who think that a person should have a service and that person doesn't want a service. And if they have capacity, that is their right as an adult. A little bit different children's, but for adults, if they decide they don't want anything to do with us, they have capacity to make those decisions, that's where it has to end. And that can sometimes be quite challenging in terms of what comes through to us for adults, because
I know that because my neighbour next door, well, he's 86 and he's had a couple of falls and he refuses. So proud.
and we can all understand that, is that we all experience that. We want to maintain that, and very often people perhaps your 86-year-old neighbour perhaps doesn't really grasp what he could be offered, and it perhaps doesn't need to be intrusive, it doesn't need to breach his dignity. He can take services without them impacting on his crowd. He should be proud to be able to stay living in his home, but that is a challenge for us constantly in terms of services.
Okay, thank you, Sally.
Okay, anybody else on page 20?
Yeah, can I ask one as well? Sorry.
Yes, we will take you next.
Councillor Howells.
Councillor Howard, yeah.
Before I say anything, Chair, I think I must say that, you know, one of the most important things to say is that I really do appreciate just how much pressure you know, I can't imagine what it's like working in social services at the moment, but I can't imagine the enormous pressure that you're under, and obviously that's also not made any easier by the sort of budget settlement that there's been recently. So, and I've not the slightest doubt this really is a wonderful job being done, you know, for some very, very needy people. I would like to say that.
Can I just come back on that just slightly? Thank you. And I, on behalf of all of the staff in social services and prevention and inclusion, are grateful for that. But what I would also say is that it is a privilege to do this job. It is rewarding. It's never dull. I have never
No,
brought
I can't imagine.
none of us have brought and I think very often, yes, it is a huge pressure and there is a stress and all that's there, but it is also a privilege to make a difference to people's lives. And I don't think there are many jobs where you can say, I came in this morning, I've got a pretty good idea of how my day is going to pan out, but it could change at any moment. And that is really exciting as a job. So yes, it is, and all of those things, but it's also a great job.
Do you want to put your question?
Well, what I was interested in is that you mentioned here client voice.
Yeah.
On page 20, and also, of course, client voice is a really central feature of the Future Wales Act. It's one of the involving people, and I've seen the case studies, and there's obviously some wonderful comments back there from clients. But what data do you collect in terms of giving clients a voice? Not, obviously, we've got the case study,
Yeah.
but with respect that when you look at the number of cases you're dealing with, they're a very small proportion. And I just wonder, what did you keep any sort of hard data on who was happy, who wasn't happy, who, you know, people who made comments or maybe people who made complaints?
And we record, so we record within our system all the feedback that we get. So, and very often, the voice of the people that we work with is quite, very often they don't want to complain about us because it's all they're getting. That can be an issue for us. Do we keep hard data? No, we don't, and it's something that we should do better in terms of the kind of satisfaction with the service. But day in, day out, when social workers, like care workers, support workers, justice workers, the whole family of people are out there looking, they are listening to those voices and responding to them. I think we could do better in this area across the board in terms of listening to the voice of everybody we work with, from the little 1 under 3 to the over 90. And I think we should get better at keeping some of that data. So I suppose the answer to the question is, no, we're not as good as we should be at the hard data. Do we listen and do we collect and do we record that on our case management system? Yes, we do. So two slightly different things.
Thank you, Jessica. Councillor Howells.
Hi, thanks. I just had a quick question, if you don't mind, and apologies, my first scrutiny. So if I'm asking sort of a bit of $1 million question, I do apologise. But I noticed a comment about increases in numbers of residential placements because there aren't enough providers able to broker packages of care in the community. So I sort of don't have much of a background in this area, but I assume that relates to sort of privately run private sector care homes, does it? And I was just sort of wondering, what's the ideal solution to that? You know, what would you guys as a department like to see?
Honestly, that really is $1 million question.
Right, I thought it might be.
Fine, I'm really pleased to be able to have a go at answering it. So, okay, so for older adults, so that's predominantly adults over the age of 65 who are vulnerable, who have care and support needs. So this would be older people who are perhaps frail, living in their own homes and have quite significant needs in order to be able to continue to live safely. So they might need assistance with washing and dressing, helping them with food, getting into bed, getting out of bed. So it's quite fundamental, basic needs. There are two sorts of, very simply, there are two sorts of care that we can offer. We can either work with that person and their family for them to go into some form of residential care. So I suppose in the olden days speak, that would be an old people's home. That's not quite how it is, and those can be run either by the council or by a not-for-profit organisation or by a private provider. There are a selection. As a council, we run 3 of our own homes, different areas of the city, and we support older adults to live in those homes. Each of those homes accommodates 32 people, and we provide full support for them for the time that they wish to be with us. In addition, and one of the primary things that we do in adult social care is we offer care packages. In Newport, all of our care packages are with external providers. So they're either with private domiciliary care providers or they're with a very small number of not-for-profit providers. The majority of providers in adult social care are small local businesses. So a little bit different in adults, but in children's, but in adult social care, the majority of the providers that we work with are small users of anecdotal mom and pop type businesses. They provide a lot of local employment within our city. So sometimes people get very kind of, oh, hang on a minute, private provision. It's not as simple as that, because these are small local businesses providing local jobs for local people in Newport to care for Newport residents. And what those domiciliary care providers will do is that they will go in a number of times a day, up to maybe 4 times a day, but maybe just once a day, to provide that basic care for that individual. Okay, so those are the 2 sort of pillars of care. Historically, across the UK, there have been real challenges in the area of providing social care, and that's been true in Newport. I'm really proud to say that our commissioning team have worked extraordinarily hard with the providers, and we are currently in a position where we have, I think, 1 outstanding package of care today. We have been in a position historically where we've had 90 or 100 people waiting for care. We're not in that position today. It worked really hard to get those packages, but it is a very, very fragile environment. Staff in those agencies are not the best paid. They're very often paid quite low wages. And as you can imagine at the moment, often, coming back to your point, for some of those individuals, they can earn more money working in a supermarket than they can in providing care. Whilst it's a rewarding job, it is a stressful. So what do you choose? So there is a real challenge at times in being able to access sufficient care. And the other area where this comes into play, and all of us will be aware, in winter time, where you see discharges from hospital care, where we have to get a package of care in place really quickly in order for somebody to be able to leave hospital. And again, over the winter, you will remember, I mean, every winter, as long as any of us can remember, there have been challenges in that area. Sadly, what's happened a little bit over COVID, and then as we recover from COVID, is that because we struggled to provide sufficient care for some individuals, they have ended up needing to have residential care rather than that domiciliary care, and that's where the difference really is. What we try to do is always work with the choices of that individual and their family, so that if they wish to remain at home with care, we will do everything we can to provide that care. But if we reach a point where they and their family and we assess that we can no longer safely meet their needs, then we would have to look at residential care. So that's a kind of whistle-stop overview beyond belief, and we'd be really happy to have a bigger conversation about that whole dynamic between domiciliary care, residential care, and the needs of citizens. I mean, sadly, I'll come back to Councillor Cleverly's neighbour. I mean, one of the issues is that often people don't want to take that domiciliary care. They're proud, they don't want somebody in their own home, they see it as intrusive, but actually it can be a fantastic way of really supporting somebody to remain in their own home. And I'm sure all of us here will have experienced with family members different sorts of care, and it can be fantastic when it's good, and it can make all the difference to somebody living safely, comfortably, and with dignity in their own home. Okay, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Harris, can you turn your camera off, please, as well? Thank you. Councillor Druitt.
I just bring it back to the director's answer to Councillor Cox's question. And correct me if I'm wrong, Director, but when you were here last, you flagged up the issue of data as,
Yeah.
yeah, I thought you just wanted
No,
to.
we did. Yes, you're absolutely right. And I mean, again, what we come back to is that, obviously, I mean, what happened from the period of January 2020 through to most recently the pandemic is that real challenges in terms of what our data looks like, because it was so distorted by that period, but also looking at what Welsh Government requires, the performance management framework, and ensuring that we can meet the needs of the requirements of Welsh Government and what they want. Also, that we understand, we need to understand that data in a way that works for us in order to ensure that our services are robust. And and that we know that we're doing a good job. I mean, in the appendices to this report, there's a lot of data, and I'm sure all of you read it and dissected it. But I would challenge that without an intimate knowledge of the data, that it's easy to understand, because it isn't. Sometimes you don't know what's good, what's bad. Is something going up good, or is it bad? And I think sometimes that's a challenge in terms of our data and how we present it. So yes, thank you.
Any other questions on page 20? I'll just throw in a comment, because they have been asked a lot of questions, and it is a bit of a knife edge that we run on with social care packages, and the bottom line is, I agree with you, we simply don't have enough providers to broker the packages of care significantly. But it's a balancing job, and you're doing a good job on making that balance, but we recognise it. Okay, page 21.
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Anwami.
Yeah, thank you. Let me just find it. Can I just ask, on the, I think it's the third paragraph down, where it refers to the shorter breaks off at the Newport residence. Yeah, I mean, fully agree that this is a highly valued service. But wasn't this the service we were proposing to cut at budget time, and where actually the intervention from Scrutiny and other commentators actually stopped that happening? So, you know, my point is really, yeah, it's a highly valued service, but why on earth then did we at budget time propose to reduce that?
Good morning, and thank you for the question. So we have a range of short break service. We don't just have one service. So Spring Gardens is the service that you're referring to, but we do have other short break services for different groups of the people that we work with. And indeed, Spring Gardens was one of the savings that we proposed and that was discussed. And at the end, in the end, we looked at a different approach to Spring Gardens. I mean, again, we've already touched on how challenging that budget environment is, and the focus that we have to take is to provide the statutory provision that we need to safely provide. And whilst there is some elements of short breaks that we need to provide on a statutory footing, it's not all of it. So it is a real, I'll use Councillor Routley's words, it is a knife edge in terms of where do we find savings, and where can we meet our statutory function, and we've got to balance those two things. I think it was really difficult this year, and we are now working with Spring Gardens, working with staff there who are fantastic, is to really look at going forward, perhaps how we can adapt some of those services to do those differently. I mean, one of the challenges is that you think, well, we could open a community centre, we could do this, we can do that. Part of the problem is we have to have services that are regulated with Care Inspectorate Wales for that group. So it has to be in a setting that is safe, that we can really meet their needs. But it was and it will continue to be a challenge for how we meet the needs of all of those in terms of vulnerability.
Yeah, I understand really the challenges, and, you know, no matter what we're doing, it's always a question of balancing things against each other. And I think that, you know, I will comment on at the right point in this report further on, because when we looking then at the underspends and the overspends in various parts of the service, you know, for the purpose of this report, I think, you know, there is a story from there that I think, you know, ought to really be put together, because it should inform the budget making for the following year. Because I think, you know, if there is a good purpose for the Social Services Director's report, is really also to inform what happens next. And finances are obviously a big important sort of consideration here. But then, you know, when we see underspend in some areas, then we have to ask why that is, overspends, well, how do we deal with that? Maybe for the following year, but you know, for this report really to be useful, I think it should sort of carry on a little bit into the budget making for the following year. That's how it sort of came out over to me from looking at it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, councillor. Okay, I'm on page 22.
Yeah, can I mention that? Could I raise an issue?
Yes.
On the, it talks of, sorry, there's a reference about 2/3 of the way down the page about the development of a regional approach to children's services.
Yeah.
And the question is, because I'm not sure that the sort of collaboration and the regional approach comes up anywhere else. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I found it there. And obviously there is the regional integration fund, isn't there, which I know we discussed at a different meeting, didn't we? I remember. And it did seem at the time, and that doesn't necessarily being unfair, but it did seem at the time that people would actually take the money and still carrying on doing their own sort of thing with it, rather than bringing services together to provide an integrated service. And I mean, surely that kind of approach, integration, is a way of, my understanding is that I think it's very probably happened more in England than Wales, but some local authorities have found they've saved significant amounts of money by coming together with collaborative approaches. And I just wondered how far that had gone. I was surprised actually, because it didn't get a bit more of a mention, if you like, in this report.
Okay, so regional integration fund is really important funding for us. I mean, of course, adults and children's services has been hugely important, and obviously we've been here before to talk about the bit and how we use that money. And that money is used in a whole range of services, most of which are grant-wide. So it's used in different ways for different services. I mean, just by way of within this re-ablement, a great deal of the work that we do within re-ablement is funded by the regional integration. Similarly, a lot of the work that we do around education services for children is funded from regional integration. And each of the local authorities will be doing similar things. In terms of collaboration across the 5 local authorities, what would be the footprint of grant, there is a huge body of work that is done regionally, from the adoption service, which is a statutory service which is run regionally. And each of the 5 local authorities contributes to the adoption service, and our adoption services, which is statutory function, are run out of regional service. Frailty, which is a significant collaboration between the 5 local authorities and the health board, to regional provision, very large financial commitment from all to provide frailty services. So that's for the frailest of our older people. We also have lots of little things. We have lots of smaller projects. So, for example, our advocacy for children is run on a regional footprint because it's a more effective way to do it. And with Welsh Government and the move to advocacy for all, that's the way that we needed to do it. And literally, I could go on for hours describing the collaboration that we have. We work very closely with the other 4 local authorities, and we work very closely with, particularly in adult services, that relationship with health is really key. And that is incredibly important to it. Now, I mean, one of the interesting things about does it save money is that we have explored other areas of regional working and looking at an integrated function. One example, for example, was doing justice, and we looked at could we do that in a way that would be more effective regionally. And actually, we found no, we couldn't. Is that because you need that local footprint, you need the local knowledge, you need the local footprint, you need that local presence in order to deliver those services effectively. It's not always a better way forward. So for some things it is, for others it isn't, and it's getting that balance right between those two things. I think the issue about saving money on an integrated footprint is really interesting in terms of Part 9 of the Social Services and Wellbeing Act is currently at consultation, and much of that is about integrated working and how we pull budgets and how we look at our budgets. I think part of the challenge that we have is that we are all facing budgetary challenges. So what we pool is completely under challenge. It is really difficult. I think there is a place for some of that, but I think we need to be careful to keep that local presence. And I think that is particularly true for Newport out of the 5, or I'm sure the other 4 would argue that they're in position because of our demographic. If you look at our population, you look at our ethnicity, you look at the age of our population, we are the only area which has a rising number of under 25s, for example. We also have a rising number of over 65s. We have to think all the time about what is it that the population of Newport needs. That isn't going to be the same as everywhere else, and we need to meet that need locally, as well as think out what can we do better on a regional footprint. So it's trying to run both things in tandem to the best effect is what you're trying to do.
Yeah. Well, actually, I mean, what you just described, it goes a lot further than I was aware of.
Okay.
I wasn't aware of quite so much going on.
Yeah, so, I mean, there is a huge body of work that we look at regionally, and we are constantly looking at, could we do things better or differently? How do we learn from each other, not just regionally, but nationally as well?
Thank you, Councillor Cox.
Chair.
Councillor Crowley.
Yeah, I just wanted to say was when we went to visit Windmill Farm, really pleased with the work that went on there. They really addressed it to the needs of the young people. That was really amazing after seeing it beforehand on what it was, you know. But also I just wanted an update on Cambridge House and the annexes at Millbank and what's the other one? Forest Lodge and Rosedale.
Yeah. So work is currently ongoing at Forest Lodge. I'll do them backwards. So work is ongoing at Forest Lodge in order to, I mean, I say to anybody, it was tired. I mean, you'll be aware it's been.
It's something you roofed in a few months ago.
Yeah, so we're having extensive work done in Forest Lodge to bring it up to the same standard as our other children's home. There's some challenges in that because the extent of the work is such that we're going to have to move the children out for a short period, which is going to be a challenge.
Difficult work.
So that's why, just to go on to the other children's homes, I'm going to be a bit more careful here, but I mean, in terms of MB and the annexes, what we're looking at there is they will shortly be registered. Okay, so they're going through registration.
Yes.
Yeah, so an RA, those annexes, we're currently working on the construction of those annexes. Now, both of those are really important for us going forward in terms of how we can offer short-term care for children rather than some of the other options that we've had. In terms of CH, what we're looking at very much for CH is still in the planning process and looking at a development which will bring it back into use for children's services. Shift forward, we've had these discussions elsewhere, but it will be very much about a focus on.
There's lots of work involved in
it. It needs significant.
How long do you think it would take?
We're looking at least a year before we will be looking at bringing that back into use.
Okay. All the best for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on 22, 23? Yes, Councillor Crewis.
Can I ask, please? I want to say first that prevention and inclusion is a hugely important area.
Okay.
Obviously, it's trying to divert people from actually coming into the system. So what have the difficulties been in sort of gathering teams together? And what have you learned from those difficulties to impact your actions in the future?
Well, prevention and inclusion has been in place for a year now, so I think I've talked previously about the first year being very much about the time to put things across, get our house in order, for want of a better word, really, and in many ways a chance to look at what all the teams were doing. So one of the things that we've been doing quite robustly is reviewing the provisions that have come across into prevention and inclusion. So really just to make sure that they're fit for purpose and meeting local needs now, not what was in place years ago. But the chance to review and refresh a lot of those services. That's been a really, really positive piece of work. And balancing that, of course, with taking the work, a large workforce that has come across, I think it's about over 400 headcounts. So the large workforce, so when we're reviewing and transforming services, we don't want to alienate the workforce. So it's been a balancing act trying to work with the team and also plan for the future in terms of where we're going. Overwhelmingly, it's been a positive piece of work. The team themselves are really happy with where they sit now in terms of those services. They feel that working much more closely with children's services and with adult services, we've got greater opportunities now to look at how we can be smarter about working together. So, for example, one of the pieces of work we're currently looking at is how can my world support Natalie's world when we've got all those referrals going into the safeguarding hub that, as Sally explained, may not necessarily end up being action or forgotten, but actually may have opportunities to support in my world. So it's really looking at how creative we can be, catch families and individuals as early as we possibly can. So that means integrating and working with education and with justice service where children may be going to justice, really catch these children much earlier and families so that we can have the right conversations at a much earlier point to consider what matters to you, what are the issues that we can support with to avoid that escalation of needs that may end up in Natalie's world or Mary's world in adults. So it's really a chance to be quite creative about putting pathways in place and work more smoothly and seamlessly between us. And a really good example is hot off the press really, you know, we've been reviewing the play service, for example, and just in the May half-term week, which was last week, we've had just under 500 individuals come through the door. Now that's a massive increase on what was available previously, and that just comes down to much better planning, coordination of all these different services and resources being pulled so that we can actually offer more consistent provision across the city, not just in different areas but across the city wide. That's one of the things we're trying to do, consistent of that across the city. So that was a really, really positive, but even the staff were blown away with the amount of people who came through the door. That's just an early indication and impact of what we're seeing through reviewing and transforming some of our services.
Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you. Yes, I have noticed that you've changed the ages for the youth service to 5 to 25, because when I worked for them it used to be 11 to 25 and that's a big difference, as you just stated, because we do need to catch them earlier, because when I worked with them we used to have young people coming in the ages of 7 and we had to turn them away all the time, which is a shame. I mean, especially with a lot of them are from one parent families and whatever. And the other thing I was going to say is I did meet Beth Allen and Sue Calman in the shopping centre of Lettuce a few weeks ago.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
But they are based in different communities. So, and also in the, because they're based in the North Hub, is the community development team based in there as well?
The community development team are going through a process of change.
That's what I was wondering, because
And that's purely because of the grant changes. They are funded through an element of the Children and Communities grant, and that particular funding stream came to an end.
because we used to have communities at work as well. Yes.
The communities for work now sits in and I've just read the book. The community development team, because that particular grant stream came to an end at the end of March, the budget was then absorbed within the wider Children and Communities grant, which is what fits with my world. So although we've got the budget, actually the previous stream and the focus of their work has changed. So what we're currently doing now, we're going through a period of consultation and looking at really defining what their role will be. It won't be a million miles away from what they were doing. They will still be very much community based. We're linking them up with our community connectors, who will come over to us adult services. There's overlap, areas of overlaps where they're all working in the community and supporting, but not necessarily together.
But that makes sense for the community connectors as well. Yes.
So really what we're trying to work towards is that we've got a community offer, a community support, place-based support from the toilet and away, rather than separated out in adults and then children and family. Bring it all together because they've got huge amount of knowledge and resource available that can offer communities in terms of advice and information about what's available. So we're currently going through that consultation period and we'll refine in the role of
Councillor Howells.
Thanks. This question might sort of tie into the consultation you were just talking about, but the reference to the Flying Start expansion, it sort of put me in mind of an issue that came up in my ward where grandparents had the care of their granddaughter who had severe autism, and they were very heavily reliant in the school holidays on something called the Newport play scheme. But they sort of found that whereas previously they'd had provision for their granddaughter for the whole school holidays, apparently the numbers that apply for it had increased to such an extent that I think they were only granted sort of like a few hours in each week for the Newport play scheme. So their sort of provision had been massively cut back. And I was just wondering if those sort of things were going to be considered as part of that consultation.
We will look. I mean, it's not that part of that consultation, the provision of that type of play scheme. I mean, we've never provided 6-week full play scheme for any child. It's never been available in the city for any child. So I think probably, Councillor Howell, if we could take that out and have a discussion separately about that, that would be helpful. There is a real demand on the number of resource that we have for play scheme across the board, and obviously particularly for children who have additional needs because they need a greater degree of support and they often need one-to-one or one-to-two support during play scheme. But if perhaps we could have a conversation separately about that, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Page 24. 25.
Yeah, 25.
Councillor Irami.
The terms co-produce and co-production have been used. I'm not sure. I can guess maybe what we are hinting at, but what are they, and should we not define them in that particular sort of context there? What do we mean by co-production?
So co-production is working with those who we support in essence. So it's about working with the children, the young people, adults, older adults, and indeed with staff and other agencies. It's working there together to look at the best possible service, to look at how that service should be delivered, what that service should look like, how that service should evolve and change. So I suppose in some senses, I mean, there is a whole body of work and research and academic work around co-production, but in essence, it is about working together. It's about ensuring that, going back to the voice of those in receipt of the services, those who have a need for care and support, that we are able to work with them to properly design effective services and to give the best possible services.
So, I mean, in the context of the case study that you mentioned in there, is it us working together with the lady who is, you know, sort of partially sighted and sort of has very little contact with other people?
Yes, it is. It's working with her and it's working with her to support her with other agencies. I mean, co-production can be about working with individuals, but it can also be working with groups. It can be working operationally and it can be working strategically. So it can be used in all sorts of spheres of work. But in this instance, it's about working with that individual to really ensure that her views and her wishes are fully met.
Okay, well, I think it would benefit from actually, you know, saying exactly what we mean by co-production, maybe, in that section.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much indeed for that. We'll move on to page 26. 27, 28.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, councillor.
Bearing in mind that Oaklands was a service that was facing the acts for financial reasons.
It was never facing complete closure. It was
Major
facing,
service.
Thank you.
it was a reduction in service.
Yeah.
But there was a risk.
There was, yeah.
The case study here is very, very positive.
Mhm.
The children concerned are benefiting greatly in many, many ways. But later on in this report, page 44, there's a budget overspend on Oaklands, I see. What measures are in place to ensure that this overspend does not put Oaklands on another knife edge?
So Oaklands does deliver fabulous service, and part of the challenge with Oaklands for these two little ones, and I suppose some of the issue is that part of the reason that there was an overspend was because of needing to provide 24/7 care for these children when they should have been to replacement. So Oakland stepped into the breach when we were unable to secure which we have now done these two. I mean, and in fact, the staff in Oakland and all who were involved in their care didn't manage just the period that they were there well. They managed the transition to the new carer as well, which was fantastic. So part of the reason for the overspend was that Oaklands is about short breaks, so which means it's not staffed, for example, during the day, during the week, because it doesn't need to be. The challenge that we had was that we had some real issues with staffing because of this situation, because we weren't able to find alternative care. So part of the mitigation going forward is to ensure that this doesn't happen again, if that's possible. It isn't the first time it's happened, is when we're really desperate for a placement, particularly for younger children with some form of disability. It's really difficult to find something, but we will do everything possible to ensure that we sustain Oaklands on the footing that it is, to bring it in on budget, basically. I mean, it's not in this report because it's this year, but Oaklands has also got an accolade this year for social care, which we can write about next year, but yes, which allows the tribute to the parents.
Councillor Casnewydd.
I would just like to say the staff there do amazing work, absolutely excellent. I'm so pleased that the decision was overturned about reducing the numbers. Because I've got a friend whose boy goes there, and she said to me, you know, it's a lifeline for the whole family. Because she got two other boys with learning difficulties, and he's autistic. For him to go there, it's amazing, you know.
That's good to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, instead of bringing the accolades here, and it's good to hear all the accolades for the service, maybe it would be more beneficial to the service if we wrote into the director with our thoughts and congratulations, because quite often members write into the director if they feel that something's wrong. And I'm sure she would love to open up a nice email that is congratulatory. And can we move away from individual cases, because we're speaking generically about the report, not about what we find in our wards. But I do take your point, Councillor Crowley. Okay, page 28, 29, page 30, 31, page 32, page 33, 34, page 35. I say a picture can tell a million stories. I love that picture on there. And then hot dogs they have. You got tomato sauce there,
Yeah.
and they all seem happy and content. And I guess that picture is amazing. Thank you. Page 36.
Yeah, Chair. Sorry, I just had a quick
That's okay.
comment on page 36.
Yes.
Um, On the service case study, I'm misreading this, but at the top it refers to Child Protection Team 1 and then explains what that is. But then a couple of lines down, it then says CP1, CP2 and CP3. So I was wondering if that was actually supposed to be CP2, CP3 and CP4?
Just trying to find where it is in the
On page 26, the top of the service case study.
Yeah.
First sentence.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Thank you for the correction. Thank you very much. We'll amend. Thank you for spotting.
I've got that right on that. But anyway, okay. Thank you, Councillor. 37. 38. 39. 40, 41. 42. 43.
Chair, can I? Yes, so do I turn this off, I think. Sorry, no,
that's okay.
I think I'm a bit premature. I haven't got there yet. Sorry.
We haven't arrived yet, have we? Or the train's on its way?
Yeah. Right, I've got the right page now,
So that's okay.
I'll wait till you get there.
What page is it? So I can. I'll count the gap. It's okay.
It was to do with the Institute of Workforce.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Page 43.
I think it starts at about 47.
Okay. Page 44. 45. 45. 46. 47. Oh,
Page 46,
thank you, Councillor Army.
sorry,
No, that's okay.
yeah, you went a little bit too quick for me then. Yeah,
Oh,
it's just by way of highlight, Chair, that I felt, again, in terms of the impact on budget making, you know, that really we take note of few things, because again, I'm not sure here, but looking at page 46, again, shorter breaks, we have identified quite a bit of underspend in there, 285. Now, perhaps Ali might explain that is not the same thing. That's quite an underspend. Yet again, you know, at budget time, we were identifying shorter breaks for the saving measure. And I just feel that, you know, we need to be a little bit consistent here, that what we put in our reports, you know, social services director report, should have an impact on budget making. So if this is the same as I think it is, that measure we identified at budget time shouldn't have been advanced at all. I don't know what Sally would say on that.
Well, in terms of the adult budget, for example, short breaks and underneath the social work teams, the bulk of that is about staff vacancy.
Yes.
So the majority of that underspend is because we've been unable to recruit. I mean, again, we actually come into the also again, as everybody be aware that within social care, recruitment of staff is hugely challenging for all posts. I mean, there isn't a post that we easily recruit to at the moment. So in terms of short breaks, is that the challenge is that because we're not able to recruit the number of staff, we're not able to offer the level of service that we ideally wish to, well, not even ideally, but that we optimally wish to deliver. And the same is true in the social work teams, is that underspend is a result of not being able to recruit staff posts. So it's a real challenge in terms of, on the one hand, it means that there's an underspend there, but because of that underspend, other staff are under greater amount of pressure, or we're not able to deliver the service that we should be delivering because we haven't got the staff in place to do it. So that's why those underspends are there.
Okay, and in terms of the staff vacancies, do we know why that is? I mean, is it, you know, sort of shortage of that type of staff, or?
Yeah, I mean, across the UK, there is a UK shortage of social care staff in all levels. So social workers, occupational therapists, family support workers, social work assistants, domiciliary care staff, residential staff. In every area of social care, there are challenges with recruitment and retention. Councillor Radley, in separate discussions, has asked for us to come to this committee specifically to talk about the workforce issues. I think in the autumn. It's in spring. So we will be coming in with a separate paper in terms of an update for scrutiny in relation to recruitment and retention. It's not a Newport issue, it's not a Gwent issue, it's not a Wales issue, it's across the board that there are social care vacancies. I think a whole range of issues. I think, back to your comments earlier, it's a stressful, difficult profession and people don't necessarily see it as a job that they want. There are areas in social care, not all, there are some areas in social care, particularly domiciliary care, which are poorly paid, so it's very difficult to attract staff. But in essence, it is a national issue and there are a number of national pieces of work going on to try to address it. I mean, actually, within Newport, while we do have issues with vacancies, I mean, we see the stats for across Wales, we're not in anywhere near the same level of challenge as some other local authorities are, but we are under pressure for workforce. So it is a massive issue day in, day out for us.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and it's going to be a big report coming to us then, and you know, fully examined. I don't know how, and I haven't got the answers at the moment, so I'm hoping in springtime we'll have the answers. Okay, thank you, and thank you for your two questions, Councillor. 46, 47.
Nice.
Yes, please do.
You obviously did detailed data here in terms of the breakdown of the workforce in terms of, you know, gender and age and ethnicity, etc. That just coming from that, there's no data about similar data relating to the client base, is there?
We could do that. We could look at
presumably when there's a referral, you open some kind of file or record, and presumably then it wouldn't be too difficult just to know somebody's ethnic background, because I think sort of you mentioned Newport is a very diverse community, and in my experience, whenever you dip into any kind of service, I've worked in education, I've worked in prison service, and whenever you dip in there, there are nearly always disparities in terms of take up and who's getting the most out of something, and it seems to me, obviously in social services, that would be very important information.
Thank you. We will definitely make a note of that for next year. It's actually, I mean, we have that data, we have the data. I mean, there are some areas of it, but we certainly have sex, we have ethnicity, but we also have age, which is also interesting in terms of who accesses social services. And that's also important, going back to a point I made earlier about the demographic of Newport and the increasing population that we have, the pressure that puts on service. So thank you, we will definitely ensure that we have that in next year.
Thank you, Councillor. 48, 49, 50, 51, and 51, there's many drafts going through here, Director. The gender makeup of adult services, there is the gender gap. I mean, we're heavily, we are 87% or approximately around that figure would be female and 13% would be male. Can you explain what are we doing to try and bridge that gap? Are we trying to, you know?
Yeah, no, and I mean, you'll see from all of it, children's and adults, you mentioned including it's a very female workforce.
Yeah.
Yes. Very female dominated, and social care is. In the same way, primary school teachers is that what you see in the social care workforce would be this across the UK. So we're no different for anywhere else. We're not exceptional at all in terms of the social care workforce. And I think, I mean, if you to look at stereotyping some of the roles that there are in social services, and particularly say residential care, family support work, those would be seen as traditionally, be right, be that wrong, but that would be what they're seen as. Hence why you see this divide. There are areas of social care where you see greater numbers of male staff. Youth justice, interestingly, you always see higher numbers of male staff in youth justice work. And some areas of what used to be called young people's diversionary work, you see higher numbers of male. And you also see greater numbers of men in terms of the percentages you got the management scale. In terms of addressing it, again, we will look at this when we come to you with workforce, but I think what we're trying to do all the time is cast the net as wide as possible in terms of to look at, for example, in terms of our residential staff is looking at not necessarily looking at qualifications, but looking at their values and their experience rather than their formal qualification. But it is a really challenging area in social care. It's about how you bring more men into the workforce and how you balance that.
I'd like to do further with an answer, and what I'm looking for is what are you doing to widen that net with regards to, are you working with tertiary colleges, education facilities, what are we really, so I could explain.
Yeah, so I mean we are working with schools, universities, further education to look at, I mean, not just us, we're looking at a number of things that are happening across the region and nationally. We're part of the We Care social care driven so that's looking at needs and attractive to people, how you ensure that there are career pathways for people. We are looking locally at things, for example, about how we ensure that there is a training opportunities and pathways so that people can come in and say, social assistant, train to be a social worker, and how they can do that with us. So yes, it's an answer. So we're looking at a whole range of things. I think, you know, again, we're in this really unusual position at the moment of facing a situation where employment-wise, people are able to pick and choose at the moment in terms of employment, and that poses some challenges.
Thank you for your answer. Okay, 52, 53. Okay, I've got a question on 53, and it's a repeated question because it goes down to, it'll be repeated further on in the programme. I'm interested in days lost, absence and reasons, and the main reasons for the sickness levels of staff.
Yeah.
First off, so I can understand, I understand anxiety and stress, emotional and other illnesses. Isn't that, look, the difference between anxiety and stress and the other emotional illnesses? Why are they separate? How can we understand
Yeah,
that?
so these are the categories that HR operate for the whole of the council. These are specific for social services. So this is how we define. And I'm going to make a real guess here. I don't think these are HR. I think these are how everybody defines illnesses in terms of emotional illnesses. But I don't know the answer to that. I'd be very happy to go away and find out in terms of the specific, because I can see where your question is coming from.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a bit away.
Because if we put the two figures together, we are
Yes.
1,900, nearly 2,000 days and stuff there.
Let's go away and unpick those.
Please do. The other thing I'm interested in is there definitely is within the services. We said at the beginning of your report how enthusiastic and great the workforce is. But as we go through the report, we see that enthusiasm waning because of anxiety, stress, and other emotional illnesses. I'm not saying we're doing anything. What are we doing? What can we do better is the idea to support this workforce, to stop them from collapsing in such a way, you know?
So the first thing is that this isn't okay, but I suppose what I would say is that when we look at the numbers in terms of sickness for children's adults inclusion guidelines to other local authorities and other providers, we're no different. That doesn't make it okay.
That makes it chronic.
But it does mean that we're not alone in terms of it. So we're not an outlier. Newport isn't different to other local authorities or other care providers in terms of experiencing these sorts of rates of sickness. That's the first thing. But is that okay? No, it's not okay, because what we want is a healthy, happy workforce, isn't it? So there are a number of things that we do across the whole of social services to try to look at how we build morale and how we build support. Some of those come from the wider council support that there is in staff. So, for example, first, the elements that we've got in place using the wellbeing policies and looking at occupational health. There's those things in place which are there for all staff across the council. But then, in addition, within social services, we have done it's just right, is we've done a lot of work about engagement with our staff, about communication, how we work to ensure that they have information. We have in some areas, notably children's services, invested in clinical supervision to assist staff to really look at when they're dealing with issues that are particularly distressing, I suppose, stressful, is that we offer them in-depth and a greater degree of supervision. Not able to offer it to the degree that we would like, but we are able to offer some. We also try to ensure that our management is sympathetic management and a caring management, not punitive management, because I think that's actually hugely important in our area of work. So we also look at ensuring that we are able, again, with other areas of the council, look at appropriate flexibility, looking at the kind of jobs that we offer, looking at ensuring that we have training and development for staff. But it is a challenge to get difficult area to be able to continue to offer to keep people at home.
I mean, it is about reducing the number of sickness days, but not doing it because doing it in a way that doesn't incur sickness days. So it's about doing it the other way. Can you explain also the lower back injuries, the community services? What's are all our employees annually updated on manual handling techniques?
Yes, the staff that need to get training. So staff have a whole range of training. Some of it was generic, some of it was so yes, there's an system.
Okay, and you know, I guess that if we could have an answer back on the difference between those two, the emotional and the stress related to.
Colleagues in nature.
I just wonder whether we could either pick this up in the spring under our retention and recruitment to have a part of that, to look at how we actually support staff to stop them from becoming ill, and how we support them to get back to full health again. I mean, just looking at all those things, because that to me is a part of the retention and recruitment policy, that if we are not, I don't want to hear we're the same as everyone else. That doesn't count. I want us to be leaders in the field of support and welfare for staff. Leaders, so other people can follow. We can lead. Very passionate about that, you see. Thank you.
No, I've got through it as chair, but I mean, most of what I wanted to ask you asked anyway. So all I would ask from what the directors told us is, because obviously I was going to ask him, the figures obviously are quite stark.
Yeah.
And I was going to also ask about what, support staff are getting actually. You've discussed that. That support you described, and how long has that been going on, if you like? Are those new initiatives you've introduced, or are those things that have always been there? Or?
Some have always been there, some we're looking all the time at different ways that we can support some. So we're looking all the time at how we can improve it. It is tricky. Some things have always been there. Some things are new, some things we're looking at. So it's a range and a mixture, basically.
Because if what I was going to suggest, Chair, is if we get an update on this at a later meeting, it'd be interesting to see what the trend is. Whether
yes, we could do trends with it.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to say that if I was able to crack sickness within social care, I didn't think I was doing it in the spring.
Oh, Susie, for laughing. That's a great comment. Councillor.
This really is on the same point, Chair, but it's looking at the data on page 56. And so there are 1,039 anxiety stress days lost, and there will illnesses 743. You already addressed what's being done to mitigate staff burnout. How many staff actually leave the service as a result of burnout?
Okay.
Is this an issue?
It is an issue. However, the majority of staff that we see leave for what I would describe as good reasons. They retire in a good way, at the right time, at the right sort of age. They go to a different area of work for promotion. They leave because they want to look after family. I don't mean that in a sort of, but they genuinely, they have caring responsibilities and they're able to do that. They leave for a different sort of job. So there's a whole range of reasons why people leave. They might leave to go to work with agencies because there are greater options for some of them. It's not often that we lose people just because of burnout. I don't mean that in a just way, but it's rare. I mean, what we generally see in Newport is people go for what I would describe as good reasons. So promotion being one of the key ones is that we see people who go to be heads of service elsewhere, or service managers elsewhere, or team managers, or they go to do more training. So they might go to do more professional training and then be in a position to come back into the workforce. So it is a range of reasons why people leave. I mean, the other thing, again, for a female workforce, we have quite a young workforce in children's services. The other thing, of course, we see is a lot of people who take some time to be with young children. And again, that is a factor in our workforce, is that we have, because of our age, because of the sex of our workforce, what we see is quite a lot of maternity leave, which is great. I see more pictures of little babies than sex, but clearly that has an impact in terms of how you're able to retain workforce, because some of those individuals may choose not to return them. So it's a whole range of reasons.
To what Danny is saying, I just shouldn't underestimate the impact of COVID, the lockdown, because I think certainly in my experience, I've had an awful lot of conversations about people who kind of rethought what's important to them and made different decisions. So not to suggest that we're losing huge amounts of numbers because of COVID, but I think there are those cases where people are actually rethinking the future because of the experience they've gone through lockdown and kind of reorganising their own personal priorities. And I think we shouldn't underestimate that either.
That's a very good point and excellently well made. When you come back in March, or springtime, whatever springtime is, we're enjoying summer now, as you can tell. When you come back later in the year, can you also look at the sort of retirement loss Because when someone retires in the age 55 in like the house service, they're not only just leaving and creating another job, we lose a wealth of experience, and it's that experience wealth that we lose. And have we ever considered bringing these back 2 days a week like they do in the NHS? But you don't have to comment now.
No, but
You do that in March as well, so it all comes up in that.
yes, of course.
Excellent, thank you. You're doing extremely well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64 and 65. We're going into the Welsh government. Okay, this is the other graph that we have. So on page 67, 68.
Chair, I was interested what the director said about the data, because I'd agree, just sort of looking at from the outside, a lot of it without knowing the context, it's difficult to know what we should be happy about and what we should be worried about. Because to be quite frank, early on the report talks about increasing demand, etc., etc. But most of the graphs here actually pretty well flatline. They do a bit of up and down, but they end the year roughly where they started. So you look at this and I think, well, everything's going well, and I suspect it's not. I mean, I don't know what director would sort of flag up as the issues that are coming out of this.
I think you're right, and that's why I said earlier is that I think there was a challenge in terms of, there were parts of this that any one of us would look at and go, oh, we could go correct, so there's differences. So there are challenges with that. And it's also that because this is over a period of time, the numbers, they go up or they go down, but it looks kind of flatline-ish just with the way that the graph is laid out. I suppose some of the things in terms of what I was drawing your attention to is just picking up is, for example, on page 69, where we've got receiving residential care. Obviously, we mentioned earlier about that number increasing. That is a slow increase, but again, that's why that isn't understanding that. But then again, if we look at the numbers of people who are actually waiting for care homes, we've actually been able to manage that. So we've got very few people actually waiting. So we don't want to see larger numbers of people going into care homes unless they absolutely have to. But what we definitely don't want is people waiting for care homes who should be seeing in them. So that's a really good decrease because we're seeing less people waiting at the time. So there's some real challenges in this in terms of it. And then in terms of domiciliary care on page 70, again, we've seen a reduction. Again, some of that may be because of some of the shifts we talked about earlier, but waiting for domiciliary care, which is just underneath that on page 70, what you'll see is some really impressive in terms of that drop in the number of people who are waiting, and that's important in terms of what you don't want. I mean, we've still got people who need to be assessed, but at least once people are assessed, they get them assessed quickly and in a timely way that meets their needs, and that's important. So that would be one thing I'd draw your attention to. I suppose obviously there's a number of sets of data here, because then you've also got the children's data. And again, you'll see a fluctuation in this in terms of these go up and down over the period of the year. And sometimes it's difficult. What we also see is that the nature of some of what's in those contacts. So, for example, in children's services in April 2023, But what you won't see in that is, for example, the number of those cases which have involved really complex child protection investigations. It doesn't tell you that. And that's a challenge in terms of the data, is looking at what's behind it to understand what that means and what that toll takes, really. There are always interesting patterns in this when you know it. I mean, we have a dreading school holidays pattern in terms of what comes in and what doesn't come in. And we have periods of the year that we know will be quiet in children and adult services. Although I have to say, even in the 10 years that I've been here, the quiet periods seem to have got fewer and shorter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair and Committee. Just additional to what the Strategic Director was speaking about, but I think from perspectives of like working smarter and transformational, there's a lot of work going on in the background, like new technologies and things like that that's being used, which are changing the style and what the workforce are actually physically doing. Things like opening curtains, you can have a smart app now, and the smart app can open curtains. So there's all different things, you know, in the background that's actually helping people around specific needs. So we won't ever, you know, get rid of the need of having that you know, domiciliary care and other care, but there's other things helping out support. So obviously the workforce that we have can obviously be, you know, allocated a bit more further out, hopefully, with stuff like that there. But some fantastic stuff in technology, which if interested to definitely look at, and to research is really, really interesting. But just support some of the fantastic work, you know, that's been done in the background to have a look at. Thank you.
Okay. Can you highlight some of the work regarding like walking carers? You know,
Yeah, so
now let the director explain.
okay, so
We know.
that's about where you've got
Yeah.
domiciliary care. So what you're trying to do is that ensure that say that you've got people who live relatively near to each other who need care, rather than having carers zigzagging across, you have carers who walk from one to another. It's a really small thing, but it makes it possible for some people to work as carers who perhaps don't drive, but it also has an impact on the environment. So you've got small changes like that that are important. And I mean, one of the things I would draw your attention to is the numbers of children who are looked after, is that despite everything and despite the pandemic, we have maintained a very stable number of children who are looked after, somewhere between 370 and 380 at any one time. And that is key in terms of some of the Welsh Government policy drivers in terms of that number. The other thing I would say is that within that, we've seen a significant increase in the number of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children that we have to care for. So whilst our overall number of children who are looked after has stayed the same, the number within that group who are unaccompanied asylum-seeking children has gone up. So if we take that group out, our actual number of children who are looked after has declined. And that is a positive. What we're looking at all the time is to try to ensure that only those children who have to be in our care are, and that primarily what we do is support children to remain with their families, be that their parents, their grandparents, their aunt, their uncle, but within their family environment. And that's an important element to draw your attention to.
Thank you. Okay, page 69, 70, 71, 72. We go on to 73, which is more graphs. 74, 75, 76, 77, 8, 59, 80, 81. Then we're on to the end of the annual report. 83, 84, 85. Yeah, please.
This is a statutory requirement that you
Yeah.
table is.
Yeah, I mean, these are what we submit, so a lot of this information that we have to submit to Welsh Government.
Right.
A lot of this is laid out for us.
That's what I'm getting to. The sort of format of this is laid out.
Yeah, it's laid out.
And you, who makes the judgment? I mean, it's a traffic light system, isn't it?
Yeah, we make a judgment on some of this, but some of it is also some of it's got guidance within that we work to within that guidance. So it's not just us going like this. It's a little bit. It's a little bit more scientific.
84, 85, 86, 7, 88, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99. I think that concludes us, isn't it? Right? Yes, we have three hiding at the back there. 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, 106, 107, 109, and 110. That's any other questions on the director's report? There are no further questions. Councillor Marathon.
Just the points to the committee saying about the workforce and that, just be assured that myself and Councillor Hughes, cabinet members, have spoken to staff and we've had some further meetings, and it's more directly to see what issues are, what concerns, what good points, what bad points, just so we're listening from the ground what's happening to improve what we can do, and to retain staff and also look at the recruitment. So just to reassure that we are doing stuff on a more direct.
And thank you. And myself and Councillor Hughes, when we come to speak on this in the springtime, we will look forward to seeing everybody, I guess, and encouraging you to actively join in the discussion on finding a better way forward, in a positive way to support the service and to support staff. So, but we look forward to that session. Can I thank you for fielding all the questions today that were put through in a very professional and concise way, and I wouldn't expect anything different from you. I've come to learn that. And can I thank Cabinet Member for coming, and the rest of the team as well. I'm going to carry on. Yeah, please.
And social services and the whole of the social services team for the excellent work.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll pass. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. We'll release you back. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Bye.
Councillor Hughes, nice to see you. I didn't realise you had joined.
Thank you for just giving you away.
All right, it's tiny handed for us. Okay, so we go over now to the Scrutiny Advisor's report, and we'll let you take us through that.
Wow, if it's all right with you, Chair, I'll run through the points and recommendations I've noted just to make sure they're the rest. I think first and foremost, I've noted that committee thanks of there was some very appreciative of their work and of the report as it is. In terms of recommendations, I noted Councillor Alnoami's comment about it might be worth clarifying what co-production means within that context. I've noticed Councillor Cox's point about bringing the data for the diversity of service users in the next report. I've noted noted your point there about clarification about the difference between anxiety and stress and emotional and other illnesses. And that we could pick that up in our recruitment retention meeting potentially. Is there anything I've missed, anything the committee wants to add, or do you feel like that's caught?
The director did say that she was looking to introduce some sort of resident monitoring data in the next report. So I thought that was very welcome.
Yes, no, I've noted that in your point out the service user data. That one, perfect.
Should we mention staff anxiety, Chair?
Just done that. Just done that.
The
Yeah,
clarification between anxiety and other illnesses.
and they're going to mention that.
And the effect that
Further information.
is having on.
Yeah.
I was concerned about the level of absence, what it indicates about the pressure.
Yeah. And they're bringing, but they're gonna, and just to show that, and they're gonna pick that up and bring it to us in their spring presentation on retention, employment and everything else. And these cabinet members will be in attendance.
That's fine. I've made a note specifically of the further information on the effect of anxiety of absences, absences really. I'll make sure that's in the report when we come to it. A committee content with that?
Yes.
And if it's all right with you, Chair, just power through, go straight into the next
Yes,
section.
please do.
As usual, action sheet is the first appendix. There's a few still outstanding from our last municipal year. I'm still chasing them. I'm hoping we'll have those sorted by recess. Obviously, we'll have the action about, the clarification from HR.
Yeah.
And hopefully that'll be added there. The second appendix is our draft forward work programme for the next municipal year. Obviously, we've just had our first meeting for the 6th of June. We won't meet until the 11th of July for the beginning round of end of year performance reviews. Following that will be the second round on the 25th. We'll have a break for recess then over August, meet again at the end of September for Estin outcomes and Newport School annual report. We'll be able to sort of look at the performance of different schools and have a bit of an input there. We'll meet again for mid-year reviews at the end of November and sort of start mid-December there. We've got an earlier budget meeting than we had last year, quite an earlier budget meeting this year. We were advised by finance that we need to meet within the consultation period. We are consultative, which makes sense. And we've had to move it back a few times just to accommodate officers and well, when we're all here. A bigger break, I think end of February, we'll be meeting again to look at the regulated services reports and the short breaks offer. That's a piece of work that's pre-decision, so we'll be able to shape how that looks going forward rather than just looking back on it and making comments and recommendations. And then the 26th of March will be the recruitment and retention report, which I put quite a bit about today.
Yes, we did.
A committee content with the work programme for the next year? Is there anything they want to add, anything they want clarification on? Or are we happy to take it forward?
Okay, yep.
Okay, then, and on that note then of contentment and happiness, I'm going to say thank you for attending, thank you for contributing, and thank you for thank you for being such wonderful people. So that's the end of this scrutiny and performance committee for our people. So thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.